We'll consider adopting those.
Motion approved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item number 1, new business, severe weather tax holiday. Ms. Standridge.
Good afternoon, council.
Good afternoon.
This first item is request for a severe weather tax holiday. The state of Alabama supports a severe weather tax holiday, and we are just asking to tack on to that. We do this every year. It will put sales tax exemptions on certain items for severe weather issues such as generators and flashlights, batteries, things of that nature.
Okay, any questions?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 2, bad debt write-off. Ms. Standridge also.
Yes, sir. This is the annual bad debt write-off for all of our water and sewer bills, and then also our garbage bills. This year, I think that the council will recall some of the advice that I've given them over the last about 18 months, that this will be the time when the COVID allowance for late payments kind of comes home to roost. You can see that in the increase of our bad debt this year and the amount that we're requesting to write off. Normally, we budget for about $300,000 to $350,000 within this sector. This year, the amount is $611,000. That is going to be, due to all of the late payments that we allowed through COVID. That used to be about 1.4 million. If you remember when we had like the big amount that we talked about maybe about 8-9 months ago. We worked on some debt relief with the county. With it, they were going to give us they were trying to give households some additional funding to be able to write off some of their, or pay off some of their utility debts. And then we were going to recoup a little bit of that. I think that our customer service professionals have done a really good job working that down from 1.4 million to about 600,000. So that is where we sit currently.
What's the, can I ask a question, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
What's the split between commercial and residential? Do you know? I mean, how much of that is
You want to have
residential customers? And
I do not know that
Water,
off the
you
top
wanna
of
get
my
up here?
head.
I'm curious.
Yes, Alvin is here to help.
Hey, Alvin,
Hey, how you doing?
Do you know that answer?
give us some
Roughly,
insights
Alvin.
into what's going on here, please.
So I don't have the split as far as residential and commercial. That's something we probably can pull some data on. Primarily, most of it is going to be residential. A lot of it is going to be students, people that are moved away, that are no longer reside in the city. A lot of times, normally you wouldn't have as much because you were cutting off on a monthly basis, but what she kind of said and alluded to is after COVID, you had a lot of things that kind of compounded and kind of stacked up. So once you had students move away, you're going to see a significant impact on that.
Mr. Chair,
Sure.
is the student debt the only thing that you can kind of give us that insight on? Any other reasons why besides the student population?
Yeah, I would say primarily most of it is probably students. You're gonna have some people that are just moved to other locations since COVID. You have some people that will kind of go back and forth from the city to Northport. But a lot of that we do recoup if they ever decide to come back to the city to set up service. But with students, typically you're not gonna have a student that moves away come back.
So when you said if they come back to the city, it's still there. They'd have to pay that debt
They
to
would still
sign
have to-
back up.
Yes.
Even though we're writing it off, it's technically still on account, right?
Yes.
But they'd have to.
So
And we do have recovered bad debts that we will book every year. It's within your report, you'll see the recovered bad debt on the very right-hand side. So this last year, we had about $69,000 of recovered bad debts from those total write-offs that we've had in years prior.
What do you think, I mean, this is environmental services question that Councilman Busby and I were talking about earlier. It looked like, except for the last 2 years, we're running about $50,000 a year of write-offs. It was only half of normal.
Well, that's,
No,
no, sir, that's due to the write-down in environmental service fees. So previous to Elevate, our environmental service fee every month was $20. Now it's $3.50, $3.65.
Okay.
And so just that larger dollar amount, even though it's probably generally about the same number of customers, that larger dollar amount is going to make a higher overall dollar amount.
So with regard to the students, typically my memory is if you're a student and you go rent a typical apartment out here, you pay a deposit on your water, right?
Yes, sir.
I asked this question to see if there's any lessons to learn out of every good deed going unpunished. When we put the moratorium on turning people's water off if they weren't paid, did that in fact use up that deposit without us being triggered to shut it off before? You understand what I'm asking?
And so we do hold deposits, and whenever the account has been closed and there is still a balance on the account, we will use that deposit to then
Right.
offset however much that is. However, our deposits are so low and some of these bills are so high. So our deposit's not gonna cover every single amount.
So put me in a ballpark. What's a
So
typical
a standard
deposit?
deposit for a residential account is either $80 or $100. Commercial is $120.
Okay, so on a residential,
If you're talking about a student apartment that has 4 students, a month and a half of service, if you're averaging about $70 a month, $75 a month, you have about a month and a half of service.
and who, Ms. Sanders, where does the responsibility for recovering that debt lie? Is it in the water department and the finance department? Who's trying to still get the money that's
We-
not been paid?
We do not have a collections activity.
Oh,
So, I'll say what we do within our department. So if a customer comes into our department and they start the process to set up an account, when we pull that social information, it normally pulls up that they owe a debt to us. At that point, that's normally when we try to collect the debt.
That's what, I'm sorry?
So I said when a customer comes in and they provide their contact information, like their social security number, some of their information, identification, we're able to search our database system to search to see if that person owes a bad debt or owes a balance. And that's typically when we will collect those funds prior to setting up that account.
So if they're still in our water service area, if they shafted us on a water payment at this address, when they go over to this address to establish service, we get them then?
If
Yeah.
they're within the city of Tuscaloosa, yes.
Yes.
But we do not have an active collections activity where we normally have, this $600,000 that's sitting out there. These people could be in Chicago. We're not chasing them down in Chicago.
Should we be?
We've looked into.
That's not a loaded question.
No,
I'm saying it's just
we've looked into
someplace where we tell somebody, you get 50% of everything you recover. If
We've
you-
looked into that before, and we brought that to council before. We have actively engaged in one of those contractors. I think that one of the returns on investment the last time was around about 6%.
How long did we put that moratorium in place?
9 months.
9 months, and then it had to be delinquent 12 months, right?
Yes, we only write off debt that is older than 12 months.
So even though the write-off commenced in something like March of 20, it ran 9 months to the end of 2020, then into 21, it had to go 12 months without being paid before we submit it to be written off.
Correct, that's why this is for the fiscal year in 9/30/2022. So that is why you're just now seeing that amount come to fruition for bad debt write-off.
Water bill. That's not right.
Do we have any recourse with regard to some of these aid programs that were set up for individuals? So
Only individuals can apply for that. We're not allowed to
Only
apply for that.
individuals can apply. Okay, are there any other questions? Your motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Funding agreement for Tick Rick.
Yes, sir,
Rice
as-
Ferry Road improvement.
As was covered in pre-council, this is a request for execution on the city side for the TCRIC McWrights Ferry Road Improvements Funding Agreement. Once we open bids, we have updated the cost estimate, project estimate within that funding agreement. The TCRIC approved it on November 28th, I believe, and so it is now coming to the city for execution.
Good news. Motion approved.
Second.
I have a question. This motion at the committee today, doesn't that deal with the change in the amount that resulted from the bid coming in and being $4 or $5 million.
Yes, sir.
So this is primarily an amount amendment, right?
The only change in the funding agreement is just for the amount.
Based on the feedback that we're getting from the underwriter today, I would call it a reduction in the interest rate that was paid above and beyond what we were forecasting. Does that impact the amount, and does that have to be dealt with?
No, sir, there is a maximum interest rate that is disclosed in the funding agreement. However, we've gotten nowhere near that, and it's just project budget total.
All right.
So the 68 million is all that we're talking about.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? All right, next item is general fund, 23 general fund budget revision number 5, Ms. Standridge.
Yes, sir, there are two items within this agenda that will, for the general fund budget revision, there's an A part and a B part. The A part is for Tuscaloosa Fire Rescue. They are asking to use a portion of their ambulance franchise revenue amount to apply to a contract with Dr. Crawford, correct? That was approved during the budget cycle for an increase in his contract payment. And so we're able to then pull down from the ambulance franchise revenue to be able to pay for that extra.
Okay, so this has nothing to do with the increase. This is just the source of payment?
Yes, sir. It's the source of revenue to be able to pay for that contract. That contract was approved during the budget process.
Steve?
Yes.
Okay.
It's just the moving of the funds from the
Got you. Ambulance franchise fund.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wilson, Mr. Crowe, any questions?
No, sir.
Motion approved.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
There is an item B on this one as well. I'm so sorry. So
Do it again.
the item B is for a certain contract within the right-of-way and landscaping section, and to move that contract to the urban development code enforcement. When we consolidated code enforcement, one of the ideas was to move the like tall grass cutting activity to that consolidated code enforcement unit. There's a contract with Calvin's Lawn Service that was originally held in our right-of-way landscaping group that we would like to continue. However, that budget needs to be moved so that the code enforcement group can then manage that contract, and that is the request that we have in front of you
Right,
today.
so we're just moving those funds to execute the same contract, same provider, just out of a different department.
Correct.
Based on changes in responsibility. Okay.
I got a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
The person, who did you say?
Calvin's.
Calvin's Lawn Service.
Is that the contract that we discussed some time ago about switching up different contracts with different persons for our uncut grass? Is it the
I'm
same one?
unsure of that. That might be a question for Ms. Kreitz, who is not in the room.
All right. Okay.
He'll be in next meeting.
Okay.
Will Smith.
Yeah, okay.
Motion approved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that takes care of section B of that budget revision 5, check. All right, good. Now for the main event. Ms. Standridge, Police and Fire Pension Fund conversion to RSA financial review. Judging from the crowd, there's a great deal of interest in what you're going to say.
Yes. And I will take a moment of personal privilege to say that I do respect and understand that this is impactful to a number of people that sit in this room personally and for a great long term. That's not lost on me. And I do understand that this piece is possibly the linchpin to all of that, and I hope that it will provide some good information for everyone involved. I'm going to start by talking about just the history of the RSA conversion initiative. Starting in 2017, this is going to be the boring part, and I'm going to apologize for that. However, we do have to get through that before we can get to the meat of everything. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board has elected to implement GASB statement number 67 and 68. 68 is the only one that really applies to us, but it required all governments to show on the face of their financial statements, which is what the ACFR is, all debt that is realized for pension plans. That really means that prior to 2017, the city of Tuscaloosa did not have pension plan debt on their books. So there was never any talk about how that debt would really affect the city of Tuscaloosa in long-term discussions. In 2017, that meant that $118.2 million was then put on the face of the financial statements that we then had to disclose and defend to all of our rating agencies. Ergo, in 2019, October, the city pursued a debt refunding, and in the process received advice from Standard & Poor's on a downgrade for their credit rating based off of the amount of debt we had taken on due to the fire and police pension fund. That fund total at the time was about $105 million of $135 million total overall pension debt. I think when we were, I was not in my position at the time, but when we were talking to Standard & Poor's, S&P, one of their major issues was the fact that the cash flow and funding mechanism for the pension plan was defunct and underutilized. So within that, the debt on the pension fund continued to grow and grow and grow every year. And that was something that they then saw as a barrier for the city of Tuscaloosa to grow in any other general capacity. We did receive that credit rating downgrade, and that kind of spurred both city administration and I think pension administration to look at the pension fund a little bit closer. So the city then requested our state local legislative delegation to update the legislation that governs the pension. When we did that, the board makeup was then changed, and then required contribution percentages were also changed. Within that governing legislation, a task force was also requested to be formed for the task force to review, analyze, and submit a report on the current fund and any recommendations that it would have for bettering the fund moving forward. In June 2021, the task force submitted that final report. Within that final report, it did say that all of the changes that have been made prior, all the increased contribution rates, basically stabilized the fund. All of the actuaries basically said the same thing. However, within that review, it was made very clear by the two members of the task force that are from the rank and file of police and fire that while the fund itself was stable, the underlying organizations of TPD and TFR and their recruitment and retention of staff members was not stable. Therefore, in order to create some idea of sustainability within that rank and file, we were then it was then recommended from by the task force to continue to look at the conversion to RSA. Financial statement impact. So this is what I kind of mentioned about GASB 68. This is where you will see within our debt disclosures. These are part of the notes to our financial statements. I am going to use this screen. So as you can see, we have like a full debt disclosure. This is the item that's really been called into question. So in 2017, like I mentioned, we issued about $118 million worth of debt on our books, and this is from 2021. As you can see, that's risen to about $166 million. Within that amount, we have 4 different retirement funds: RSA, police and fire pension, our hourly pension fund, and then our supplemental pension fund too. These 2 are very, very small. The main players are going to be RSA and the police and fire pension fund. We then further break down what that debt is and the ins and the outs of that debt, and you can see based on the different funds what we really get. RSA is here on the left. The police and fire pension is on the right. Total debt from RSA, we have about $38 million. Total debt from the police and fire pension, we have about $132 million. And then you can see the total amount of membership below. $38 million into about 1,200 employees, $132 million into about 900 employees. The amount of active employees are the ones that are currently employed and paying in, and this debt will then sit on their backs. As you know, none of the retirees are going to be paying in anymore, and so all the contributions and then asset increases are all going to be sitting on the backs of the active employees. The people pretty much in this room. Conversion valuation. So this is probably the meat of everything that people are in here for. In order to be able to value how much it would cost for us to transition to RSA, we have contracted with Kavanaugh McDonald, that is an actuarial firm, and they are the actuaries that actually do the RSA work as well. They performed initial membership valuation services. This second bullet point is going to be I'm going to explain it, so don't get too up in arms. Benefits accrued under the police and fire pension are not preserved. However, that means that your membership is transferred. And so what you will get from that transfer of membership is you will now, instead of getting fire and police pension benefits, you will now get RSA, ERS benefits. Those ERS benefits will be higher than anything that you could get under the current pension. Current retirees will maintain benefit payout at the current levels. And then Chief Smith asked that I review this one specifically, that there might be some people in the room that care. Then this is a city related decision. This is not an RSA related decision, but any members, any active members that are currently in the drop, or any members that enter the drop in the next couple of years, will be offered the option of continuing employment and foregoing their drop benefits if they would like to stay and go under the conversion to RSA. Or they can sign a waiver that then says, no, I want to go ahead and retire now and get my drop benefit, and then I will only retire under the police and fire pension and not retire under RSA. That option will be given. Every single time that I've talked to the mayor, that's always been what we've worked towards. Those drop assets are extremely important to maintain within the police and fire pension fund as is. Those extra assets will then go to be converted over to an investment account in RSA. That will be an individual by individual decision basis though. So obviously you will be able to elect what is most advantageous for you. So under the current Kavanaugh McDonald valuations that we've had, there are new assumptions that the board has adopted. Those new assumptions will change our valuation throughout the next 5 years. They have a smoothing effect that they have elected to implement. And so what that means is that all of their new assumptions will be easily rolled in so that any of the changes in our valuation will be seen gradually. Some of those assumptions are, there are new mortality tables, they're updating their discount rate, things of that nature that go into their general valuation. All active members classified as Tier 2 will be covered under the Tier 1 benefit structure. The city of Tuscaloosa has adopted that we all will be under Tier 1 benefit structure. However, even on top of that, public safety, state certified public safety individuals are also allowed Tier 1 benefits. This is the current year's conversion valuation that we just got a couple of weeks ago. So what this shows, and this is the way Kavanaugh McDonald does their general valuations, is that we have our current plan. So the City of Tuscaloosa current police and fire pension plan. There's that $30-ish million of unfunded liability. That's the debt that sits on our books for the current employees such as myself. There is the current police and fire pension plan that is then converted into what it would look like under RSA. So as of right now, you saw that the police and fire pension liability, the unfunded liabilities sits at around $130-ish million that we saw a couple of slides ago. Well, when they transition to RSA, that's going to be $166 million, just because their benefit structure is so much higher. And the contributions are a little bit lower. So they then take the original city plan, they take what the converted police and fire plan would look to be, they merge them together and they create this new City of Tuscaloosa, including the police and fire pension, and what that plan would look like. Our total debt would now be up $203 million. So I stuck this.
Ms. Standers, when it says prior year comparison, that's hypothetical, right?
No, sir. So I'm sorry. That's what I was about to just say. Is that I stuck this in the slide just so that you could see. So we have had this valuation done now 2 years in a row. This one that I just talked about is the second year.
Okay.
This is going to be the first year that we had it done. So as you can see, the total debt is actually decreasing.
Mm-hmm.
The total percentages, and I can keep on going down, but what these percentages are, these two right here, are the required employer contribution rates for tier one. This is the tier one section. So as you can see, 23.5% was what they said in the prior year report. 21.69% is what they say in this current year report. So again, the debt's going down, therefore the required contribution percentage is also going down. Tier one, 21.69%. Tier two, 22.34%. Last year that was 24%. Remember those percentages, and I'll apply them in numbers in just one second. So in general, well, I'm just gonna go back one second. In general, this is all pretty and well and good, but what does it really mean as far as city budget and city finances? And that's what this is going to be for. I'm not going to go into all the machinations about how I got these numbers. I would assume that if you want to know, you'll ask me about that later. But the important part is that we take all of our departmental salary costs and then apply the percentages that we just talked about. Total tier one employer contribution budget would be about $13 million. This includes all of the city. So that is current employees plus all of the police and fire as well. 13.0 million for tier one, 7.1 million for tier two. So total employer contribution required, if we were to blend the two plans, is $20.2 million. Currently for fiscal 2023, we have $4.3 million budgeted for our state retirement contributions, and we have about $7.8 million budgeted for our police and fire employer contributions. So we take 20 million, we deduct what we already have budgeted, because we already know that we're going to have that year over year, so we're already working on that assumption rate. The additional amount of money that we're going to need is about $8.1 million.
Indefinitely.
It will change every year.
Change, but there's not a finite point at which that ceases.
That's correct. While I can tell you that within pension actuary valuations, there is an amortization period of the high debt. Normally, because service costs change daily, you guys just standing in this room have changed service costs already. Those numbers don't generally go down significantly. They might adjust like we saw, you know, year to year, they might adjust a little bit here and there, but they're not going to adjust significantly then.
Okay, so that's the bogey side.
Yes. So $8.1 million. If you'll recall, the cost evaluation that I kind of did last year with the old numbers was about $7.9 million. I will go ahead and say that the one done last year was, and I hate when the mayor says this, but I will use his term of building the plane while we're flying it. And so last year's valuation was done a little bit on the fly and not with as much expertise as I think I have now. So some of the detailed inputs I have changed, specifically overtime here. Any questions on this? This is probably a big point. No? Okay. So another one of the big questions is how do we pay for it? And you know, some of the council members have had a briefing on this previous to now, as well as the chiefs. So this might be a little bit of old information. However, it's probably good to go through it. What we currently do, when we first started talking about the new pay plan, that was about 2 years ago, we set up the public safety fund, which is really a restricted line item within our general fund budget. But what it does is it takes certain revenues and it sets them aside to pay for only the upgraded cost of the new public safety pay plan that we implemented about 2 years ago. Within that public safety fund, we have revenues. So the revenues that we currently set aside are within Elevate Tuscaloosa, 20% is set aside and moved over to the public safety fund. Within fiscal 23, that's about $4 million. We have an event fee on the ticketed events where alcohol is distributed. Currently, only the amphitheater really falls into that venue subset, and so that's about $60,000 a year. The rental tax increase on the mega student apartment developments. If you'll recall, we phased it in only half a year in fiscal '22. In fiscal '23, that's the full breadth of the year. That's about $1.7 million. The UA public safety reimbursement, that's our game day fee. That is going to be $250,000 a year. That actually starts in fiscal '24, so that's in between these two. But you can see one of the years disclosed in fiscal '26 there. The additional sales tax received from the sale of alcohol at those UA events. It's really kind of meager. We're budgeting about $50,000 this year. Traffic light cameras. Those are the red light running cameras, and so every ticket that is paid off of the red light running cameras is then deposited into the public safety fund. The last line that you'll see here in fiscal '23 is the RFFI surplus transfer. That is the one that was talked about during the budget cycle. What did you like?
I just said I contributed to that.
The red light
Okay.
I'm sure that everybody around the room appreciates that. So the RFFI surplus transfer is $1 million that was set aside during the budget process. So those are our total revenues. We have about $7 million for fiscal '23. So the next section down is going to be all of the expenses that flow out of the public safety fund. Right now, we really only have the pay plan. And so these costs here are the cost of the upgrade to the pay plan. Basically what we did was we took, if police and fire had not had a new pay plan, if they were still under the old pay plan with all of us, little guys over here, that we would value their salaries in the old way. We then take what the new public safety pay plan is and we value it at the upgraded cost. The difference between those two is what we say that the public safety fund has to pay for. So those are these two amounts here, the 2.024 and the 2.346. This last line item down here is a small fee for Kavanaugh McDonald to make their conversion valuation for us. So we then have the total expenses that come out of the fund. We have a surplus or deficit every year, and then we accumulate that surplus deficit year over year. I will say that in my financial projection, I set fiscal year 2027 as conversion year, just to be able to see where we get to before that period. So up until fiscal '26, our total accumulated total is $5.35 million. That's a save up amount that hopefully will help us be able to convert after that period. What we could do additional prior to conversion that we're not doing right now, one thing that was talked about was departmental savings. That both TPD and fire have a departmental budget, and if they either spend it all or don't spend it all, or go over, we will then take those total accounting and then we'll put it into the public safety fund. In fiscal '22, you can see that budget versus actual savings for police is about $628,000. Fire busted theirs by about $1 million. We're working on that, right, Chief? So going forward, we have levelized budgets, and so we hope to have about $1 million from savings from police. That will be from their vacancies generally. And then we'll hold steady in fire. If we were to set aside these savings amounts, we should be able to get about $7.3 million in the accumulated projection. So this is probably the real question. What can we do after conversion? I know this is a subject that has been talked about within the rank and file, and it is not lost on everybody that it seems somewhat unfair. However, as a stopgap, I do think that it generates a decent amount of funding. Currently, the police and fire pension withholding amounts are 13%. So everybody within the police and fire pension is required to withhold from their paycheck 13% of their salary and 13% of their overtime to contribute to the fund. Under RSA, that amount is lower. If you're in tier 1, I think that public safety is set at 6%. And then if you're in tier 2, public safety is set at 8.5%. So the difference between the 13% and then the other two amounts, if we were to ask every person to maintain that 13% withholding out of their paycheck, then we could possibly get another $3 million in fiscal 27, first conversion year, and then stair step it down over a 5-year period. So basically what that would do is that would maintain a 13% withholding for each individual employee only in that first conversion year. The next year it would be at one step down, one step down, one step down for a 5-year period. So if you were tier 1, then the difference between 13 and 6% is obviously 7, so you'd have about like 1.3% of a change within your withholdings every year. The next option down that we could do after conversion is we have certain debt amounts that will then reach the end of their payment requirement. The first two within fiscal 27 are going to be the public safety radio lease for about $930,000, and then our 2014 bond about $1.5 million. So those are already sitting within our budget that we know that we have to pay. So if they're now rolling off and we don't have to pay them, we can set that budgeted amount aside for possible RSA conversion payments. Within fiscal 28, that then grows. Our Project Crimson 5-Star then rolls off at $675,000. Patriot Parkway rolls off. And then if you keep on projecting out, in fiscal 2032, 2019 refunding payment also falls off about $1.4 million. So, first year after conversion, we could possibly have $3 million with the increased withholdings, $2.4 million in roll-offs. And that amount changes as you see in the table. Total overall look, I know this is big, I know it's a lot of numbers, but basically what it means is that you have your public safety fund that we already do up here. We have the possible new stuff down here. Conversion year of fiscal 2027. If you'll remember that $8.155 million is the increased cost, the additional cost that we need to have for conversion. Amount available for conversion in fiscal 27, just as we sit here, and that's it, is $7.7 million. So the only difference that we have to make up is $460,000. We can easily do that with the amount that we saved, building up until conversion year. So this is what I do here, is that the amount that we have available for conversion is in this green line. The amount that we would need to make up, or the difference, is in this line here. And then if we eat away at that savings pot that we already set aside from fiscal 23 to fiscal 26, we then have this much left over still within savings. We never go negative. So even just within this picture, conversion in fiscal 2027 is possible with just these measures. I know that fiscal 2026 is the preferred conversion year, and so I tried to do a quick look at that just to see what numbers it gives us. Same general look, but then of course, no debt roll-offs within fiscal 26, and a little bit less in the percentage savings, just because salaries are less. So the percentages applied to them are going to generate a little bit less in the difference amount. So same general setup, but as you can see, right in fiscal 2029, our savings pot goes negative. So I would say that we would need about $2 million a year additional starting in fiscal 2029 if we converted in fiscal 26 versus fiscal 27. Last but not least, Social Security. Social Security is going to be one of the big questions that I still have out there in the nether. Currently, the police and fire pension is classified as a Social Security equivalent plan. And what that means is that everybody that's involved in that plan can be exempt from Social Security. The DOL allows you to not have to participate in Social Security. So right now, none of our police and fire actually have Social Security withheld from their checks, and the city also does not have to pay Social Security on them. The ERS side of RSA, which is where our plan sits, is also classified as a Social Security exempt or a Social Security equivalent plan. However, the city of Tuscaloosa has elected to remove themselves from that safe harbor. And so all regular city employees like me, we do have Social Security withheld, and the city does pay that extra 6.2% on top of to the Social Security Administration for our membership. The issue comes that if we were to merge all of the rank and file into the current city RSA plan, is there any way that we can possibly class them out to where they do not have to go with the Social Security exemption waiver that current city employees have? That's a question for an attorney, the DOL attorney that we've been possibly talking to and would like to contract with to be able to answer that question. Because if the answer to that is no, if we cannot class out all of the other police and fire employees when they merge into RSA, an additional $2.8 million is going to be needed every year to pay that amount to the Social Security Administration. On top of that, one of the ideas of how we can pay for it in that gap bridge of them continuing to withhold their 13% gets called into question too, because they're going to be required to withhold another 6.2% on top of that. At that point, you're asking them to now withhold about 19% from their paycheck. That seems a bit excessive to me. On top of the fact that another $3 million in the city's budget is a bit far to go. That is all that I have. But I think that it does lay out that the idea of conversion is possible, that the finances seem sound within that 2027 conversion year, that extra revenue will be needed for a 2026 conversion year. And Social Security continues to be a question that I would like to have answered sooner rather than later.
All right. So it is 3 minutes till 4 o'clock. A, thank you. B, I'm going to ask that we come back to this point next Finance Committee for this reason. It's important, it's complicated, and today, if anybody could see what is on the Admin and Policy Committee, there a lot of days I would run over into another meeting. He's gonna be lucky to get through before council, much less cutting in. So I'm not, let's allow 5 minutes. Thank you. I've got questions. Chiefs, one of them is not related to finance so much as it is to recruiting. This Social Security, would you call it a class out, opt out?
Being able to class them out.
Class them out. Next week, I would like the answer to, a big thing driving this is recruitment and retention, check?
Yes, sir.
Does that spoil it?
No, sir. I don't believe it does, but I do want to make a point while y'all think about
Sure.
during the week. 26, 27. We've got to do 26. When you start promising 27, that's 4 years out. We've got to do 26. Y'all want me to fill the ranks. The city wants to be safe. It's not an option. It's got to go 26. I don't know how we get there, but we got to do it.
I mean, Councilor Busby, I'd say just one quick
Sure.
thing. I was in that little meeting, and with Carly and the chiefs and the mayor and I know I wasn't the only one, but I made that point too. I'm saying in a very small setting, and I'm saying, not because we got a large setting here, I think we have to find some way that this is 2026. It even sounds better, but I think the longer we continue, we're gonna be 50 officers short.
Yeah, it's happening. We're 33 short right now, and we're losing them by the week. I lost
So-
one 2 weeks ago because of RSA.
So I'm just saying, that would be my number one goal. I'm not speaking to the rest of the council right now, but I think we absolutely have to do 26.
Thank you, sir.
So if we were to vote today, was it to just go ahead and start?
So generally, I think that the item to be considered is really going to be the intention of the council, is to actually have a vote for intention. To have an intention to convert would be a trigger point for staff, I think also a trigger point for RSA, that we could engage an attorney, that we could start truly engaging RSA with certain parameters of cost conversion analysis. That really is just going, and to be completely honest, it's going to be the voice of the council to the people that are in this room and possibly the people that are watching, that this is the road that we're going down.
Right. And I thank you so much. I have learned so much from you on this thing,
Thank you.
So putting it off for another week, how would that set us off? The sooner you know, the sooner people can get to work on it, right? So do we need
Yes,
to
sir,
put it
that's
off?
true.
I mean, I'm just saying, because it's
Putting it off
just
for
showing
another
our
week
intentions.
has zero impact, because what will have to happen first is we're gonna have to get this on our legislative agenda. This is not,
No.
City of Tuscaloosa can decide what it wants to do, but until the Alabama legislature takes that desire and ratifies it, we can't do anything, nothing will happen.
So are we looking at possibly getting this out of committee voted next Tuesday? Is that what we're kind of looking at?
It's not today. I mean,
Not,
I mean, next Tuesday is what I'm saying. Because we've heard the discussion. I've got officers daily. What are we doing? What are we doing? If the financials have been done, and we keep pushing it, I don't want to lose 2 more officers waiting for a commitment from the city council. I mean, is it unreasonable that next Tuesday we have a vote out of council to move
I don't
forward?
know that it's unreasonable, Chief, I just don't know that it's meaningful. So, I can tell you without taking a vote, I'll bet you I'll leave room for error, maybe not one, but I don't know.
Right.
I bet you every councilman on this council is gonna vote to pursue this,
Right.
right? That's not the hard part.
It's just me and
hard
Chief
part
Smith can tell a
is-
lot.
Huh?
But me and Chief Smith can tell our men and women over and over again, hey, this is coming, work on it, we're sitting in meetings. But until y'all say it and do that resolution that says, look, we're going towards it, we're just spitting words.
And that's where I was gonna.
And that's why we want that hard commitment of, possibly get it out next committee meeting, that, hey, the city of Tuscaloosa, city council members have spoken. We're going to RSA, let's get there. And then that's what we need on our part, because we gotta recruit. And I know that you may say, what's a week, what's 2 weeks, what's 3 weeks, but it adds up when I'm losing 1 officer, 2 officers, and it's no disrespect to anybody in this room, but man, we're fighting tooth and nail for officers. When y'all speak and say we're going to RSA, it means something. When me and Chief Smith, yeah, do our people believe us? Yeah, but we're at limited power. Y'all make those tough decisions. Y'all are the ones that lead the city. So I guess that's why, I'm looking for an earlier, rather than pushing it to January or something like that to get that.
I know I'm in.
But that's just my take.
And that's a lot of what I'm hearing echoing from the fireside, is that, yes, they're used to hearing it. The other day at the Iron Bowl, he was able to talk to a lot of our personnel and, saying some of the same stuff I'm saying, but it was hearing it from a different viewpoint. They're at the point we're saturated on what we can say. They're looking for actions from y'all. And I
Yeah, then
think
we just
by
voting our
doing
intentions
that,
to
you're gonna
support
put a
this.
lot of
We
things-
voting that we intend to support this.
Chairman, I have a question for so I'm in support of making this happen in 2026, and I know that this is a moment where talk is cheap, so I'm also in support of making a resolution so that, everyone here and that's watching knows that we are seriously trying to make it move forward. But have we seen all the possible options to make this happen in 2026 without going negative, or can we explore that next week? Or is this presentation it?
So, so any of the options for possible new revenue, I would not,
Okay.
I wouldn't explore that necessarily this
Okay, gotcha.
upcoming week. I do think that it is something that we can have discussions about later.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
sorry.
I like 2026. I like the way that sounds.
I like
so
what you
that's
just
where I
said.
am.
I
I
stumbled
like
over
that
that
it's
one.
bad.
I like
I
what
get
you
it.
said too.
And we know this is hard decisions, we know that. It's a personal thing for all of us, it's our retirement.
The decision truly is not hard.
Well, I appreciate you saying that.
It's not, the decision's not hard, it is the finding it up there to then do what we decided to do. And I mean.
I guess what he said, until we make
Well,
that commitment to do it though.
Till it goes on paper, it didn't happen, so that's our big thing. is, you know,
We got
want that-
27 items.
Mr. Chairman, somehow we gotta find a way to do this in 2026. I don't know. You know, sometimes you have to take a leap of faith with good numbers. I mean, I appreciate what y'all are bringing to us, because I know there's been a lot of thought, and been a lot of questions from, you know, each one of us, because they did meet with us individually too. I mean, you know, so that's why you're probably not seeing a
That's what
ton
I'm
of,
saying. If I
ton
figure
of
we-
questions right now.
If we,
I mean, I
if we
think
intend
it's.
to do it, then
Let's go ahead. with
we ain't
it.
gotta wait
Yeah.
next week to say, I intend to do it, but I'm gonna tell you next week. Let's just do it, and then work on finding the money.
And
That's all,
But
that's what I'm saying.
if it would, I mean, it would be, I think it would be helpful to, again, I guess if it's next week we talk about this, is to explain again, when we have this discussion and we say what our intentions are, talk again about those next steps and what happens with this. And I know it has to go on our local bill, you know, local delegation, whatever, to go to the State House, and kind of how all that, just the
Would
pattern.
you like a possible time, like an upcoming timeline?
Absolutely.
We can do that.
If we say next week, if the chairman says we're gonna vote, say we're gonna vote, whatever, then what happens at that point? Here's the clock, here's what happens, because I think it's important for our employees in fire and police to understand, they can look at something and say, believe it or not, here's a game plan, here's the time frame, and here's what we're moving forward. I just think that's.
Now, legislative agenda is getting closer too.
Yeah, I think that's important.
And
That
Mr.
puts all of
Holmes,
us on alert too about,
sure.
you know, and say, well, if we vote, we say that we're intending to do this, well, then when's the next vote?
And
you
Mr.
know-
Holmes did push out the legislative agenda, email
He
to
did.
you guys
Yes.
to be able to add. So I think
Yes.
that this is clearly something that we wanna add to that legislative agenda packet. And
So
then,
let me clarify a point, Mr. Holmes. Do you need not you, do we need a vote on a specific resolution? Or is the inclusion to pursue RSA within the legislative agenda enough? What's required to move the ball forward?
Ms. Johnson and I have been discussing that a little bit. I'm not sure, Ms. Standridge, what we had in mind. We could certainly draft a resolution setting out the council's intent if that would be the preference.
I know when we were moving to 10-hour shifts, Cynthia Altman, she wanted a resolution from y'all saying that y'all are okay with it. So that may be something with the local delegation, that there's, you know, the undying support, that there's a piece of
I
paper.
bet they'll want that.
Yes,
And-
because
and
with
this-
10-hour shifts, we had to go that route as well.
I believe they'll want that.
The James King at Maynard, who's been helping on the legal side through this process, knows a ton about it. And we've discussed the Social Security issue, but haven't. I told him not to start pursuing that yet because I don't need to pay a bunch of legal fees for somebody to research that issue until we decide we're going that direction. But that's something they're prepared to move on and begin
Who would
researching on.
draft a resolution that this committee would forward to the council, or that the council can consider directly? Who would draft that resolution?
My office in consultation with the mayor and Ms. Standridge typically.
Okay. Well, when could you have it drafted?
I could have something before this committee next week if that's the committee's desire. I write quickly.
And when could that be advertised to meet the public requirement?
It would be, if it came, there's no real publication requirement. I mean, it will be, what do we do with our resolutions? We don't publish our resolutions at all. And so it would just be a resolution formalizing this council's intent for the staff to continue to move forward and take the steps
Why
necessary.
not do it next week?
Say that again, please.
It would be a resolution formalizing this council's intent to move forward with the RSA conversion and request the staff take the steps necessary, which would be the financial legal steps,
Request the staff to take the steps necessary.
to continue to move forward with that conversion. I mean, obviously, we get down the road, with this and numbers change massively. There are always points in which this body could say, whoa, this isn't where we thought we were headed. And so the resolution of that intent doesn't bind you. It puts you pretty well in the box, though.
Let's do it then, let's do it.
All right, why don't you draft a resolution for this committee to consider for next week?
Yes, sir.
And then go straight to
But,
the council.
You can get, that's fine with me, but I've got big questions on this, not little questions, not little detail questions. I've got big chunk questions. And I want some time to ask those and have them answered. So I want us to pick back up here next week, Ms. Standard. And Mr. Holmes, I want that draft resolution available, and that both the members of the committee and the council have been able to see it in advance. And if y'all wanna take it directly to the council, I don't have
Well,
a
if,
problem at all with that.
I'd heard somebody say double up. If doubled up, it will be included as part of your council agenda that will be published on Friday.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, as part of that, can we have a timeline
Yes, sir.
laying out if this is voted on, then here's what should happen? Here's the progression of where we go, and I'm sure you're gonna discuss it. I just would like to know.
We
Just
can-
memorialize.
That's
Well,
gonna
that's-
come
and-
from this
Yeah,
consulting law
that's-
firm that we're
Right,
hiring,
that's what I'm
right?
saying, it's going.
Well, I think that we can hit some big high points. I mean, there's gonna be some smaller ones
Memorialize
that
it
the
some
lawyer
ways.
will help us refine. But I think as far as what you're talking about, Mr. Crowe, what is going to be discernible for the council, I think maybe we can work to put together some general, I mean, it might just be 5 minutes on a timeline, but yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, are there any other questions or comments? To all of y'all who are here today, I appreciate the time and inconvenience and everything else it takes to get here. I hope you'll come back next week. I know it's another week, but I hope you'll come back.
We will.
All right.
Thank y'all so much.
Sure,
It means a lot.
Is there any other business for the finance committee?
No, sir.
Is there a
Motion to adjourn.
Second chair in this.
All in favor?